building a 400 horsepower Vortec headed small block for under $1,400. Are you guys still watching? My bad. I didn't think anybody actually wanted to hear about this. So, alright, let's get into it. AKA Sawtooth. So guys, save this video because this is the official how-to on building a 400 horsepower, 6,500 RPM Vortec headed small block using a 500 lift camshaft with no machine work involved whatsoever. But since you're not having the machine work done, you're going to have to do these checks yourself and be very precise in the disassembly and the reassembly of putting these heads back together. But if you follow these very simple yet very precise instructions and get the valve spring kits that are specifically made to do this, you're going to be fine and you're going to have a good time. Thank me later. Call it a fucking day. Amen. Now, this is assuming you already have a first-gen small block Chevy to put these Vortec heads on. First things first, acquiring the Vortec heads. You're looking for a 906 or 062 casting off of a 5.7 350 Vortec engine. We're not doing anything with the 305 Vortec heads. The Vortec headed small block build is a cheap and easy way to obtain some decent horsepower. They have 64cc chambers, whereas most old school small block Chevy heads are 75 and 76cc, with 194 intake valves, and they were Chevy's best flowing head until the LS1 came out, but still featuring the 23-degree valve angle just like the Gen 1s. So since it sounds so much better and it's just that easy, why aren't more people doing this? Well, here's why. And it's not the funky intake that these heads require if you want to run a carburetor on your small block. Here's the problem with the stock, unmachined Vortec head and a high lift camshaft. The stock factory Vortec head can only handle about 460 maximum lift. That's an RV cam. The distance between the retainer and the valve seal is too short. Taking a set of factory stock Vortec heads, dropping them on your small block, and installing a 500 lift cam would bottom out the top of the valve to the valve seal. As you see over here where I illustrated, this valve spring kit allows more room from the top to the bottom to run the higher lift camshaft. Now you're going to get a bunch of people in the comments saying, oh no, you can't do this, you can't do that. Never mind their LS swapping asses. But that's also why this easy ass 400 horsepower build isn't that popular. Because of stuff like this, it's a bit finicky, people shy away from it. But right here, right now, I'm telling you how you can do it. The key to running a 500 lift cam with stock, untouched Vortec heads is using Beehive LS6 valve springs. Now you can get just the springs for about $100, but it's the whole kit that makes the difference here. You have to get the springs with the locks, with the retainers, and I'll explain why. You don't have to use Chevy LS6 springs either. You could use the Comp Cams version, costs about the same, but it's specifically made for the GM Vortec. You see the size of these valve seals that comes in this kit? Those are almost half the size of the factory Vortec head valve seals that Chevy used on their engines back in the day. That gives you about 30 thousandths clearance to go from that 460 max lift camshaft to almost 500. Now where you make up the difference is that 10 or 20 thousandths that it claims that you can run 510 lift is in the retainers. Now you could also go one step beyond all this and get offset locks and raise the retainer up even higher on the valve stem. But now you're running into a stock rocker issue, and this build is under 400 horse, under 7,000 RPM. We're going to run the stock rockers, so we don't have a problem with the stock valve cover. It doesn't really matter who you get your kit from or what brand it is, as long as it's the Beehive Spring Vortec valve spring kit, just like it says here. And regardless of where you go, they all cost around $200. Now, I'm going to throw 3 cams at you guys, but the question is, are you ready to spin 6,500 RPMs and piss your fucking neighbors off just like I've always done with the 500 inches of lift? Okay, cam number 1, keeping it short and simple, like always, because a lot of you are newbies and beginners. That's why I stick with the basic comp cams. 292H, 292 duration, 501 lift, 2,500 to 6,500 RPM. Exactly where you need to be with these Vortec heads. Now I know I've had this camshaft in something that I own at some point, and when it comes to comp cams, I've tried them all out since the age of 17. I went all the way from 5,500 up to the 7,200 that they offered, and sat there and thought about which one I liked best as it idled in the driveway, pissing my neighbors off and my parents. Camshaft number 2. Almost the same as the one I just showed you, but slightly different. It has an offset duration and lift, which rumor has it, the Vortec heads appreciate more. This is 507 split by 510 lift with 284, 296 duration, 2,300 to 6,500 RPM range. You can expect this camshaft to sound just slightly different at an idle. Camshaft number 3 is also one of my go-tos as a kid, Isky Racing Cams. Now this cam is 274 duration with a 490 lift, advertising 2200 to 6500 RPM power range. So it doesn't matter what brand, what style you go with, if you're right around 500 lift and right around 280 duration, this is what you can expect from any cam. Camshafts are kind of like women. Blonde, brunette, redhead, it doesn't really matter. In the end, they all kind of do the same thing. I mean, they all kind of make the same noises, don't they? Meaning women and camshafts, right? I mean, I don't know. From what I've noticed, they do anyway. Don't forget a basic set of hydraulic lifters. Here's a set of Howard's Cams lifters listed at Speedway for $129. Good for stock or mildly racing application. Now for the last thing that scares people away from the Vortec headed small block build is the intake. Yeah, if you buy one new that's the name brand Edelbrock or Holley, they can be rather pricey. In fact, the dual planes are actually substantially cheaper than the single planes, but I'm choosing a single plane for this build because of the higher capable RPMs that the Vortec headed small block is able to produce power with. Whereas if you remember with the Stumpy 350, I chose the dual plane. After about 2 minutes of looking online, I was able to source knockoff brands for about half the money from places like eBay. And as always, with this head and cam combination, I recommend just about any 650 CFM carburetor, be it Edelbrock, Holley, Quick Fuel, whatever. 650 CFMs-ish is right where you need to be. Now since the Vortec headed small block build is going to be spinning higher RPMs because it's capable of more output because of that, you're going to need a stall converter to match these camshafts. Anything from around a 2700 to 3000 stall converter is going to work for you. This is also why it's a little bit higher of a budget to put together the Vortec headed small block compared to the Stumpy 350, 305 heads. Whereas on that build, you could get away with the stock torque converter. On this build, you're going to have to spend that $300 or so to accommodate. One other main component that I'm recommending for this build is a Melling high volume oil pump. This is to ensure reliability at the added RPMs that I'm advising for this build. For the $55, you can't go wrong. So guys, when it comes to the Vortec headed small block build, it's really no extra work to go through all this, take it all apart, put the smaller valve seals on, and when you do that, make sure they're driven down all the way. That's another thing with Chevy's large ass valve seals that they used. Sometimes they weren't driven down all the way. If you don't already have a set of ready to go Vortec heads, you can assume to spend about $300 on a pair. When you do, it's no sweat to take them all apart. You got to take it all apart to change the valve springs anyways. And I recommend changing valve springs anytime you do a cam because even just aged springs that are 20, 30, 40 years old can be bad and float at the higher RPMs. It only makes sense to change valve springs, one, to maximize your performance with the new camshaft, and two, aged springs are more than likely somewhat bad anyways. Just like solid lifter cam guys will change their springs every few seasons because solid lifter cams are very hard on springs. With the proper valve spring kit, you can achieve all this without having to have the heads machined, without having to have screw and studs put in, with guide plates, any of that. This is a how-to with a bolt-on, factory stock, Vortec head, max lift camshaft build. Though I don't recommend going much higher than the camshaft that I've offered you or going with a higher spring pressure spring, because at that point you do run a risk of pulling out the pressed-in studs that these heads have. But with springs that are less than 550 lift and camshafts right around 500 lift or less, you'll be fine. And if you guys ever have questions about something you're unsure of and you're wondering if you can or can't do it, get a hold of any circle track or demolition derby guy, because those guys have pushed the limitations of cheating and what you can and can't do with factory parts for about 60 years. That's the background that I come from. So when I get a bunch of people on here commenting, oh, you can't do this, you can't do, you gotta, we've already done it, proven it, beat the fuck out of it, spun it to 7,000 RPM, and won with it.